Hello and welcome to another episode of the Gritty Hour. I have a very exciting guest today. I have Paul Lear, who just finished a stint as the manager of the Fort Ontario State Historic Site in Oswego, and is about to become the president of the Safe Haven Holocaust Refugee Shelter Museum, also in Oswego. I think it's at the same location. And welcome to the Gritty Hour, Paul. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Real. This is great. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And before we started recording, I was telling you I didn't know anything about the Jewish refugees that ended up in Oswego during World War II. So I'm looking forward to learning about that. But first, I want to talk about the Fort Ontario State Historic Site. You had mentioned to me in an email that Fort Ticonderoga only covers two wars, right?
That's right. Yeah,
It-
there are two war Fort Ontario was every war from the French Indian War through Iraq, Afghanistan.
yeah, walk us through the history of that if you can.
How many hours do you have?
As many as you need, lad.
All right.
All right.
Well, it starts in the 18th century. Fort Ontario was built by the British in 1755. It was one of three forts in Oswego. And the Marquis de Montcalm, the great French general, came to visit in August of 1756. He attacked and destroyed all three forts. So that was in 1756. So Oswego was very important because of water.
Yeah.
It was Oswego was the only toehold the British had in the Great Lakes fur trade. So the area was contested all through the 18th century because of the fur trade up to the end of the French Indian War. It's rebuilt in 1759 by the British. It's used to attack Fort Niagara, take that from the French. And it's used to take as a base for Amherst attack on Montreal, the last French stronghold during the French Indian War. So 3 to 5 campaigns of the French Indian War go through Fort Ontario and Oswego. Yeah. So 1759, it's built for the second time. Uh, it goes through Pontiac's Rebellion, which is the greatest Indian Native American rebellion uprising in history. It's very violent war, the great attempt to drive the British out of North America, at least their territories. It is abandoned in the early 1770s because the British were moving all the troops to the cities like Boston, New York and Philadelphia.
Right.
We know how that worked out.
Yeah.
Lots of trouble with natives there. But it's reoccupied in 1775, and part of the buildings are rebuilt.
Reoccupied by the British or the Colonial.
It also becomes in a way, a refugee area. Refugees, the Loyalists, were fleeing the Mohawk Valley, Schoharie Valleys. They're being threatened by the rebels, who are taking them prisoner, harassing them, and they get to Fort Ontario, and they use that to move into Canada. They were settled there. There's also a big conference of the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, there at the fort in summer of 1775.
Mm-hmm.
Now, up to that point, the Haudenosaunee are neutral. They're not in with the British, but they hold a conference there. The British try to convince them to join the British. They decide to be neutral at that point in the summer of 1775 into 1776. So that was a big conference there. In 1777, it's used as St. Leger's base to invade the Mohawk Valley and try to take Fort Schuyler or Fort Stanwix from the British. Heard of the siege of Fort Stanwix and the Battle of Oriskany. St. Leger is trying to move down the Mohawk Valley to move on Albany to meet up with Burgoyne. General Burgoyne is coming up the Champlain and down the Hudson Valley to take Albany. They were going to try to divide the colonies in two through the Hudson Valley. But St. Leger gets stymied at Fort Schuyler in the Battle of Oriskany. His native warriors and loyalists take a lot of casualties. So they get discouraged and go home. And St. Leger decides to come back to Fort Ontario. It abandons the siege of Fort Schuyler, Fort Stanwix. Fort Stanwix comes back to Oswego. He takes all the cannon, sends them up to the Thousand Islands to a new fort the British are going to build there, and abandons Fort Ontario. So in 1778, the Americans, some of the rebels come up from the Mohawk Valley and they burn the buildings down. So Fort Ontario is abandoned. A lot of the British raids, the terror raids into the interior of New York and Pennsylvania, go through Fort Ontario in the 1770s, late 70s, 1780 or so. It's not until 1782 in the spring, under pressure from the Mohawks and the Haudenosaunee, that the British rebuild Fort Ontario for the third time. Right, large fort and with cannon, and so they're set. They want to like make sure that the Americans don't come up and take Oswego. They want to keep a grip. Whoever controls Oswego controls Lake Ontario, really. So that water route from Albany up the Mohawk Valley to Oneida Lake and down the Oswego River is vital.
All of this is pre-Erie Canal.
Yeah,
that we're discussing.
It's the same route.
Yep.
And right up to Oswego. That's why it was so important. There's a whole chain of forts along that route coming up to Oswego, like Fort Brewerton, Sylvan Beach. There was a blockhouse, Fort Bull. Very historic area, a lot of fortifications. So the British rebuilt the fort in 1782. In 1783, in February, as the war is preparing to end, it doesn't end at Yorktown in 1781. It doesn't formally come to an end until April of 1783. But in February of 1783, Washington is nervous about the British having that fort, and he sends the last Continental Army expedition against Fort Ontario, last one of the war in February of 1783. It has to be a surprise attack. It has to be a night attack. Their native guide gets lost in the snow. Figure there's a snowstorm in Oswego in February. Everyone's freezing. And the sun starts to rise. They're in sight of the fort, but they have to turn back because they've lost the element of surprise. And they go back to the Mohawk Valley. So Fort Ontario remains in British hands at the end of the Revolutionary War. And the British keep it until 1796, along with other Northwest posts. The British wanted to see if the revolution was going to work out. There's a lot of turmoil in the colonies, the Continental Congress and things like that. And they wanted reparations for all the loyalist property and territory that was taken. That never worked out. They went to arbitration with all that in 1794 during the Jay Treaty. And by 1796, all the forts were turned over to the United States.
The John Jay orchestration there?
Yeah, the Chief Justice.
Yeah.
He negotiates the Jay Treaty. Right. It was the first time that nations went to arbitration to solve their differences. So an arbitrator, all the lawyers figured out how to end the whole thing, get the British out of the Great Lakes Post. So the U.S. takes over in 1796, but we're a very poor country. The army was very small. The fort was run down. The British had a very small garrison when they were there. They couldn't really maintain it. It's a fort built for 500-600 men or more, 8,000, and everything's made out of wood. You know, it's not treated lumber, so that didn't stay together too well. So the Americans in 1803, after the Louisiana Purchase, the United States abandons Fort Ontario because they can't maintain it. They have more problems getting onto the country that Lewis and Clark we just claimed.
Right, in the West, right?
Yeah. So, and so from 1803 to the War of 1812, things fall apart. All the local settlers come in and grab all the windows, doors, anything iron, nails, you name it. So by the War of 1812, the fort's in ruins, bad shape. Even the gravestones they took. So I had a woman a few years ago give me a call, and she had something, and she wanted to show me. And so she walks in the office, and I don't see her carrying anything. It's not a button. It's not a coin, nothing like that. So then she shows me a picture of a gravestone. Wow. It was one from a child of a soldier that died at the fort in 1783. And so I go, okay, I know, Katie, you're Irish, aren't you? And you're superstitious. She nods her head. You want to get rid of this thing, So she donated it to the fort. So what the settlers were doing, grabbing any material they could, for foundations, walkways, lintels for windows and doors. And so they ended up at her house, which was built in 1828. and there's a lot of that around Oswego. So when the War of 1812 begins, um, Fort Ontario is in ruins. The U.S. is completely unprepared for this war.
Right.
Uh, the governor of New York, Tompkins, was fantastic. He sends a militia garrison up to the fort, to garrison Oswego, they build some buildings, some barracks, a hospital, and various things. But they never actually improved the fort itself. And the Oswego Harbor wasn't deep enough, and the currents are so fast that they could not really keep a fleet there. So the main American Navy base is at Sackett's Harbor, a beautiful harbor there. But all the supplies for those American ships have to come through Oswego along a traditional water route. By
Mm-hmm.
that time, by the 1790s, early 1800s, they have a small canal system around Rome, New York. So it goes a little quicker. And they're poling these big Schenectady boats with 5,000 pounds of supplies on them. You got cannons on them, cannonballs, anchor ropes, chains, musket balls, everything for that fleet and for the army at Sackett's Harbor and up in St. Lawrence has to go through Oswego. So a lot of warehouses are built there,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't rebuild the fort. And the United States never puts a regular garrison there. Now, the War of 1812, the main theater of action was Lake Ontario. It was not other areas. We hear about the great ship battles, in one-on-one ships, but
Or
there's a
Baltimore.
battle, yeah, in
Yeah.
Fort Lake Erie. They have a knockdown, drag out. The Americans win. Also in Lake Champlain, the British didn't have enough sailors to really properly man their ships, so the United States won on both those lakes. But on Lake Ontario, the two commanders, Commodore Yeo for the British and Chauncey for the Americans, they don't want to get into an all-out knockdown, drag-out fight because whoever loses Lake Ontario basically can win the war. They can invade Canada or they can invade the United States through Oswego.
Mm.
So they didn't risk it. So in 1812, the war started. The British aren't ready. We're not ready. By 1813, the British are really getting it together. We're getting it together. Uh, and there's ships are out on the lake, but all these supplies, you know, flour, ship's parts, cannons are stacking up in these warehouses and on the wharves at Oswego. They're unguarded. So it's a very tempting target. So in June of 1813, uh, the British fleet comes in and they attack. But luckily, the Americans had a good commander, Major Carr, and he gets some of the cannons from these ships, sets them up in a redoubt, and he's able to fight off the British. They weren't that strong enough to land. And when 18-pounder cannonballs start skipping along the surface towards your boats full of like 50 guys, that you turn around in a hurry because you're not going to last very long.
Right.
1813, Oswego, Fort Ontario dodges a bullet. But in 1814, this new British land commander, Drummond, and he doesn't take any prisoners, literally. The British are upset. The Americans have burned a village near Buffalo. In some retaliation, the British took Fort Niagara and they burned down every house around the Buffalo area. They unleashed the Indians on the local community.
Mm.
That's what Americans feared a lot. And that's what Oswego was facing in 1814 was the British unleashing the Native allies if the Americans put up any resistance. They put out the message, these lakeside communities, if you don't resist, let us take your flour, your grain, all your foodstuffs, and we'll leave you. We won't hurt you. So,
Right.
so Oswego was in that position.
If I could pause you for a second,
Yep.
Paul, I just have a couple of questions before we get past 1813.
Yep.
For those of us who are geographically challenged, how would a British ship go from, say, Londonderry or London to Lake Ontario? How would they
Technically,
get there?
it would not. They built them um, in Kingston, Ontario, the beautiful, the great harbor there, and that's where they built their fleet
Okay.
uh, because there's plenty of of wood there and
Timber.
timbers in
Yeah.
Canada.
Hmm.
And occasionally the British government tried to help out by sending them pre-made ships, but that just made it worse because then you had to ship them up to St. Lawrence, which is a nightmare. But London couldn't quite get that.
Right. I got you.
The British didn't have trouble building ships. So
And the,
1814. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say the other geographic question for those who aren't from the New York State area. Um, how far is Oswego and Lake Ontario from the Canadian border?
About 54, 55 miles.
Hmm.
You know,
You're
it's
you're in
deep
a
lake.
you're up there now, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah, you're in a location where when people like me say I'm upstate New York, you guys get pissed off because I'm like an hour north of New York City.
I just laugh.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to get some
that's
geographical
good. I'll
questions.
just keep on droning on and
No,
on.
that's fine. I'm very interested in what you're saying. So
Okay.
we're at 1813 is where I.
Yep. Now we're in 1814. Now the
Okay.
British have it together, and they want to attack Sackett's Harbor, which is where the fleet was.
Hmm.
It was a shipbuilding race. Whichever side built the most ships had the advantage. The more cannon, the more ships. It just goes back and forth. And in the spring of 1814, the British were ahead. They launched a couple big frigates. They came to Oswego and they meant business. And they begin a bombardment. They do try landing. The weather turns bad. You figure that in Oswego. They go back out into the lake. And they come back the next morning and they bombard the place. And the Americans, though, they have 300 men. Some of the regulars were sent in from Sackett's Harbor. They're facing about 1,300 British. They're way outnumbered. They're way outgunned. The Americans have 5 condemned cannon, little field cannon. Some of them, 3 of them don't have their trunnions, those bars that stick out from the side to support the cannon.
Right.
But the Americans, the 3rd Artillery and the Colonel George Mitchell, they're determined. But Americans got their butts kicked, for like 2 years this war because these incompetent, you know, old generals from the Revolutionary War.
Hmm.
And every time they turn around, they're just leading them into trouble. So the 3rd Artillery is now, they've got their own colonel in charge, and they're going to put up a fight. Colonel Mitchell orders these men, do not leave your post, like your guns or anything, until driven from them by the point of the bayonet.
Okay, so these are land-based guns.
These are land-based, little, 4-pounders, 6-pounders, maybe a 12-pounder. The first day of the battle, within a few minutes, one of the biggest guns burst. It's no good.
Mm.
Then the other one is no good. So they're down to like 3 guns by the second day of the battle. So then they also nail their flag to the flagpole as another symbol of their determination to fight as long as they could. So big bombardment in the morning. Then in the early afternoon, the British launch an attack, kind of like the D-Day invasion.
Hmm.
You got all these smaller boats all getting together, then preparing. They come in. They've got gunboats, big, longer boats with a cannon in front. And
And how much of an
so
army did we have up there at the time?
300 regulars.
Okay.
That's it.
Mm.
Great troops. The 3rd Artillery, one of the best in the Army, with some of the 1st U.S. Light Artillery, but barely 300 men. Then you have militia, who really aren't good for much, really, only in certain situations. They consume the supplies, then they leave.
Mm.
So, but Mitchell puts up a fight. The British land just east of the fort. He meets them at the shore, and he's got 100 guys out there in his line, and they drive him back to the fort, gets in the ditch, and takes him. The Royal Marines take a column of troops and go up along the bluff. They storm the north part of the fort and swarm it. It's hand-to-hand combat. The Royal Marine Lieutenant Hewitt, he wants that flag. So he gets through. He's wounded 3 times. He's with his color sergeant, cut the way to the flagpole, gets to the top, tears it down, gets down there and leaning against the pole. He's losing a lot of blood. An American is wounded, tries to shoot him, and his color sergeant runs him through the bayonet.
Mm.
So this is a sharp little fight, a short fight, maybe 16, 17 minutes, maybe half an hour, but the Americans put up a good fight. And so the British take the fort on May 6, 1814. The Americans that survive retreat up to Fulton, New York, which is Oswego Falls. that's where many of our guns and supplies were being stored before they got shipped down to Oswego and then across the lake over to the Sackett Harbor at the east end.
Right.
Um, but the British don't follow them. So the British win, but they didn't get everything they wanted. And they lost about 19 men, about 60 wounded.
Hmm.
The Americans lost the equivalent. Um, um, some were captured, but the British didn't get all they wanted. They got, about 1,000 barrels of flour, some whiskey, uh, various meats, things they need to feed their troops and sailors.
Hmm.
The British really had difficulty feeding their troops in Canada. Canada couldn't support them. Almost everything had to be imported. All their farmers, of course, they're in the militia, so they
Hmm.
can't bring in their harvest. It makes the situation worse.
What month
Well,
of the
that's why
year was this battle?
this is 1814,
No, but what month of the year?
May,
Oh, May. Okay.
May 6th, early in the year. Um, so the British don't get everything they want, but some help. So that's why they were raiding these Lake Ontario communities with their ships and boats, getting food,
Hmm.
to keep their troops and sailors going. So the British leave, uh, but now we're falling behind in shipbuilding race at Sackett's Harbor. Um, so Lieutenant Woolsey, or Captain Woolsey of the U.S. Navy, him and Chauncey get a plan together to sneak all those cannons up at Fulton over to Sackett's Harbor. So they come down the Oswego River um, during the day, and at night they strike off to head towards Sackett's Harbor, but they're heading for Sandy Creek, not Sackett's Harbor, because the British are blockading that. They go up that creek. One of their boats gets lost. He tells the British what's going on, and the British come up, follow them up that creek against orders. All right. Do not follow Americans up creeks. Commodore Yo tells the British captain, and Woolsey had American rifle with him, and Oneidas, a group of Oneidas. And when those British Royal Marines and naval and sailors came around that hook in the creek, about 2 miles up the creek, these riflemen let him have it, and it was all over in a few minutes, and they
Wow.
captured everything.
Wow.
So our cannons got the Sackett's Harbor. Then we had finished our two ships. Then we controlled Lake Ontario.
Hmm.
But there's no attempt to rebuild Fort Ontario after the war. Um, so
Did,
it's not
did they
till
did they move those cannons into the after the after the war?
during the war they got them all up there
Okay.
because they put them on those boats and brought them up, and then we controlled the lake, so we got them up to Sackett's Harbor. The British Royal Navy was blockaded in Kingston Harbor for a change.
Hmm.
Then by the fall, the British built a bigger ship, and we're back blockaded in Sackett's Harbor. So by the spring of 1815, the British had a three-decker, big ship in a line like the HMS Victory.
Hmm.
That was on Lake Ontario in the fall of 1814. By the spring, both sides would have had several of these huge ships sailing on Lake Ontario. It's crazy.
Hmm.
Then the war ends, and luckily for the Americans, because the British were bringing all these troops in fresh from the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon's defeated, and so luckily the peace is negotiated. So no one wins the War of 1812. I think the only concession we got was Carleton Island up there in the mouth of the St. Lawrence. So
Lake Ontario, is that the biggest of the Great Lakes?
no, I think those other ones up to the further to the west, Superior,
Is
they're
Lake
much bigger.
Ontario a freshwater lake?
Oh yeah, everything's fresh, and it's
Hmm.
also the second deepest of the Great Lakes.
Hmm.
So the fishing here is great, by the way.
I could imagine,
That's
yeah.
why it's a sports person's paradise here.
Hmm. Hmm.
Salmon, everything, cohos, steelhead, trout.
Hmm.
Uh, Great place.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the American Army or the Americans never rebuilt the fort to begin with.
Not till
Uh,
1839.
I was just going to say, when did they start?
Yeah, they didn't do it after the war. They wanted to, but then we signed a treaty with Great Britain for more of a peaceful border
Hmm.
with British Canada,
Right.
and so it never got rebuilt, and so things just lay in ruins for until 1839. 1837, there's a rebellion in Canada called the Patriot War, the Patriot Rebellion. Canadians are rebelling against the British government. They wanted more representation in the government for common people, right? Because usually just the people with connections, the more aristocrats, and so
Well, similar to the Revolutionary War in our country, right?
yeah,
But
you
while you're getting to that point in the conversation, I was going to ask you if it was okay to show the Fort Ontario State Historic Site page while
that'd
we're
be great.
talking. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. Um, I don't know if you can see it on your end or not.
Yep, there's the website.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I just want to, because the reason why I want to share this particular during this part of the conversation is because it has a picture of the fort that I wanted the folks. If you're on Spotify or Apple or whatever, you'll have to just click on the link in the show notes. But if you're on YouTube, this is what the fort looks like from the early 1840s, as I'm reading.
Yeah, it's 1840s, built with wood and timber walls, pressure treated lumber, early version. In the Civil War, they start to replace it with stone. But by 1872, the was a peaceful border with Canada that signed, and so they stopped construction. That's why you don't see the walls started or finished in places.
And
So,
that's Lake Ontario in the background, obviously,
yep,
right?
yeah, it's the mouth of the river. Beautiful sunsets here.
Yeah, it's a nice photo, I got to tell you.
Yeah, that's
Makes me
the way it
make,
is here.
makes me wish I was there right now, hanging out.
It's been gorgeous here.
Yeah. Oh, here too. It's
Fantastic.
been. Yeah. I'm in
Fantastic.
the Hudson Valley area, so our weather, I guess, is quite similar to yours, except for winter.
Yeah, I lived in the Hudson Valley for 7 years, though. So
Yeah.
I was down in Newburgh at Washington's headquarters.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm actually in Salt Point, which is just west of Washington Hollow. It's a small little place which they claim Washington hung out for a couple of week or so
Right.
on his retreat to out of New York City.
Yeah, out of White Plains. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tough times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously the new one. This is not the one that was built in the 1840s, though, was it?
It is. The buildings are just the walls were modified during the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And in Civil War, the fort's used as a recruiting center for the Union Army.
I see.
And the United States is very worried about the British who are joining the Confederacy or attacking from the north.
Right.
So they kept a regular Army garrison at the fort during the war because of that. You also had those Confederate raiders who were planning attacks on harbors along the lake.
I think they actually they raided Vermont. I know that.
Yeah, St. Albans, Vermont, robbed a bank, killed some people.
Yeah.
We planned on that at Oswego and other places like Rochester, but our agents were able to discover who they were and stop it from happening.
Okay. So, what was it in the 1840s? What was it throughout the Civil War? What besides being a recruitment center?
Just training. They train these recruits and then send them off to, say, their various regiments, like the 81st New York,
Okay.
the 16th U.S. Infantry, and the 7th. The 7th showed up. They're the ones whose colonel turned them over to the Confederacy in Texas at the beginning of the war. So they had to stay at the fort for a year or so before they were exchanged for Confederate troops.
I see.
Then the 16th U.S. Infantry garrisoned the fort the last 2 years of the war. And they lost a lot of troops in the various campaigns. Basically, in these Civil War battles, the volunteer regiments, various states would eventually they'd break and run, and they throw the regulars in to hold the line. And regulars don't retreat at that time, so they took a lot of casualties.
Yeah. From my familiarity with the Gettysburg battle, which is extensive, I guess. It was the regulars who, during the Wheatfield part of day 2 on that battle, it was the regulars that really held the line.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oswego had some of the famous regiments, 81st New York, but the most famous, one of the immortals, was the 147th. They were out in Sickles' line the first day of Gettysburg when he hung them out to dry, and their colonel got wounded, didn't get the order to retreat. They got trapped in a railroad cut. And eventually they got rescued, but by that time they lost like 70% of their men.
Right.
Then the last day of the battle, there's a nice quiet section by in this around these trees, by a stone wall.
Uh,
Go there. Everything's been quiet there. You know where that was? That was
uh,
that was a target for Pickett's charge.
yeah, yeah, oh, the copse of trees. Okay,
Yeah,
all
the
right.
tops of
Yeah,
trees. That's where
yeah,
they sent the 147th. So
right. Yeah,
did some more damage. A lot
yeah.
of collections from the 147th, like the desk where Lieutenant Lyman wrote down all these casualties, their names, and killed and wounded. That collection of paperwork was at the fort, and that desk he wrote them on are there on exhibit there.
Okay. So during the Civil War, this was still an active military base, serving as
Very
a
much so. Very
okay
much so.
training center. Okay.
Oh yeah, you had extra barracks built. You had at least 2 battalions there at one time. Then a lot more recruiters from different Union regiments there.
Makes me wonder if any Canadians fought for the Union.
Very yes, actually, many did come down, enlisted at Fort Ontario, or at Fort Niagara. Yes, a lot did.
Let's see, I never knew that. Okay, see, I'm learning.
My wife's ancestor didn't come down during the war. He came down in the 1850s, worked the canal. He had joined the 81st New York. He had like 3 or 4 kids, and he got killed at Cold Harbor.
Ah,
So a
mm,
lot of Canadians, French Canadians down in
yeah.
Oswego.
So was it always an active base throughout up until and including World War II, or?
Um, Oddly enough, for the most part, it was.
Mm,
Um, Places like Fort Niagara, they were the garrisons were not there to have ordnance sergeants, but Fort Ontario they mostly kept the garrison there. Early 1880s needed modernization, so uh, it was abandoned by the Army for 3 years, but still there were engineer officers and others living at the fort, so it wasn't really abandoned. The Army comes back in 1884 after modernization, things like bathrooms, bathtubs and things.
right.
And then 1894, when the Army is changing, they're going from company-sized posts to battalion-sized posts. We're not fighting the Indians anymore.
Mm-hmm.
All those smaller posts out west are mostly closed. Fort Ontario is obsolete. 1898, some troops come in from the regulars, the 9th Infantry, to recruit for the Spanish-American War, actually the Cuban insurrection,
Okay.
right? So they're recruiting local men to join the 9th Infantry. They go off to the Boxer Rebellion, where some of those guys are killed. Others are killed at Samar in the massacre there in the Philippines, local guys. But by 1901, it's really done. But because you've got Teddy Roosevelt becomes president, and Elihu Reuter, Secretary of War, um, they're native New Yorkers. They got some political influence there. This local Republican figure, he influences Roosevelt enough to rebuild Fort Ontario as their modern red brick Army battalion post.
Mm,
So it gets a whole new life. 1905, 06, it reopens as a modern battalion-sized post,
mm,
and it operates into World War One when it's the whole fort. Too small for infantry needs during the war. It becomes a general hospital, an Army General Hospital.
ah,
Several thousand U.S. troops are brought, for follow-up operations, rehab, try to get them back in society.
mm-hmm.
Smallpox, not smallpox, excuse me, tuberculosis center briefly in the war. All the soldiers from local army camps like Camp Syracuse and those in Massachusetts are
And
sent there.
this is World War One you're talking
World
about?
War One, it was
Okay.
huge.
Mm-hmm.
You had
Yeah.
almost 1,100 army beds there, staff about 800.
Mm,
It was packed with people. Um,
mm,
yeah, some cool people were there, like Ludwig Doublemans, the children's author, the Madeline series, Red Orphan Girl.
mm-hmm.
It's one of his early books is about his experiences at Fort Ontario.
Oh,
It's called My War with the United States. It is absolutely hilarious. He's an Austrian immigrant.
oh.
It reads like episodes of MASH, right? It's serious business at the fort,
Yeah.
but he is just hilarious. He
Oh, yeah.
becomes an artist and author. But My War with the United States, it's well worth the read.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
So can you get a little bit into what happened during World War II? Because you would,
yeah.
I'm educating myself that this was a destination for some Holocaust refugees.
It goes to the 20s and 30s as regular Army post.
Uh-huh.
But by 1940, we're gearing up for World War II. The regular Army leaves. Roosevelt, they make it into a special unit training post. They bring the Harlem Hellfighters to the fort.
Mm.
They convert them from infantry to anti-aircraft artillery. This at Fort Ontario is where the blacks first got a chance at a technical field in the U.S. Army.
Mm.
Right, this is quite a milestone in the civil rights movement. Black
was
officers, black soldiers,
right.
technical work, azimuths, mathematics, things I can't do.
Mm-hmm.
So then the training military police, first black military police battalion is trained there. They bring illiterate soldiers or foreign-born soldiers, guys from Eastern Europe who don't speak good English, or those in Appalachia, Chinese Americans who need to learn English.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole unit of teachers there teaching all these soldiers.
English
And
as
they
a second
leave,
language, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they teach them enough to pass their draft boards,
Mm.
just enough.
Mm.
Interesting period. And then the Army is gone by March of 1944. In January of 44, Roosevelt established the War Refugee Board.
Mm-hmm.
He established a policy for rescue and relief for the Jews of Europe.
Right.
We were the first country to have a refugee policy. So Roosevelt has an idea that we need to get refugees, out of Europe. That's what he's being pressured to do,
Mm-hmm.
and he's pressuring our allies to take refugees. Say England or Northern Africa, French and other territories, but our allies are saying, why? Why should we take refugees?
Right.
You're not taking any. And the Nazis are just laughing and saying, why should you don't even want these people either?
Mm.
So
What year did he what year did he try to implement this first?
This is 1944.
Okay.
So in the spring but it's all politics because there's a lot of anti-Semitism, anti-refugee feeling.
Right.
Congress doesn't want refugees. Labor doesn't want refugees because we're just in a depression. We're just coming out of one. So
right.
A lot of new workers coming in. So Roosevelt takes a chance. Of course, he's ignored the Jews of Europe for years, but they're not Nazi-occupied Europe. So, but the War Refugee Board was able to rescue about 150,000 because providing bribes to Nazi officials and others to get them in.
Mm-hmm.
But they had this idea of establishing a refugee camp, he doesn't like the word camp. He preferred shelter. So he decides to form the Fort Ontario Emergency Refugee Shelter to house about 1,000, mostly Jewish refugees from Europe. Right? He needed an excuse, though, an emergency, and that was when Allied supply lines got so clogged with refugees in Italy. That's when he can announce that he's bringing these people over, brought them in from Italy.
Mm-hmm. The Jews from Italy, were they all Jewish mainly, or
not all? But it's about 983 were chosen. Supposed to be 1,000, but some probably didn't show up for the boat. You know how that goes.
Uh-huh.
And so mainly Yugoslavs were the main. There were some Germans, Poles, and others. Mostly a lot of Yugoslavians because that was the last area the Nazis moved into, and they were able to flee.
Right.
And some from France, right? But FDR, because of his background as a historian, him and TR were both historians.
Mm-hmm.
He came to Oswego in 1913 as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, gave a great speech, a master speech, telling why we had to prepare in peacetime for war. He told everybody World War I is coming, but no one will listen.
This is FDR you're talking about.
FDR.
Yeah.
As governor in 1929-31, he comes to Fort Ontario during his 2-week tour of National Guard camps. Because besides regular troops, they established a National Guard artillery training camp at Fort Ontario. They go and train with their big guns out on the lake. So he reviews what's probably his favorite regiment. It was TR's regiment, the 258th New York Field Artillery. That speech in 1913 is one of his early master speeches, where his policy of preparation for war is firmly established.
Right.
So when he sees a list of recently abandoned Army camps to to choose for his refugee camp. He says, Fort Ontario is my camp. I know its history very well. It's an excellent place. So that's why Fort Ontario was chosen. Um, so in June and July, representatives go over to Italy. They spread out. They put out the word they want applicants for people to come to America to come to Fort Ontario, and they narrowed the list down to about 1,000. And they got them together at the ship in Naples, Italy, and sailed to the United States to New York City. And then on the ferries over to Hoboken, the big port there, and the railroad terminal.
Okay.
Of course, these guys, the folks, they're rough shape, very poor clothing, many of them threadbare, and they hit them all with DDT for delousing.
Right.
Of course, the clothing just disintegrates.
Right.
Rough. And they put them on these 2 trains, and they bring them up to Oswego at nighttime, and they arrive in the morning of August 5th, 1944.
Right into the fort they went?
The railroad tracks on the north side of the fort. Just the other side of the fort there on the right, there are railroad tracks.
Okay.
And that's where the trains came in. And the first thing you see is barbed wire chain link fences. And well over 100 of these people had been in Dachau, Buchenwald, and concentration camps, had been tortured, persecuted. And many were in terror at this. But luckily, Ruth Gruber, who was a special envoy of the Secretary of the Interior, it calmed them all down and said, "No, this is okay. These are around all army posts." So that was their first impression. And then they unloaded them, and they were lined up and got processed through customs. Each one had to wear a tag around their neck that said U.S. Army casual baggage. Everyone had a number.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they were,
given what was going on in Europe, it's interesting that they processed it that way.
Well, they get there, and reporters show up. Of course, they're following the story. Now, up until August 1944, the Holocaust stories have mostly been put in the back of newspapers. It was not frontline stuff.
Right.
Well, Life magazine is there. Other magazines, all the newspapers are there. It goes front page. Reporters finally got a Holocaust story they could sink their teeth in, they could relate to. They could actually talk to these people. So it results in the Holocaust stories moving up from the back to the front pages of New York newspapers and mainstream media.
Right.
At the same time, the refugees line up along the fence, and local townspeople, mainly the women, and employees of the Fitzgibbons Boiler Works were making Sherman tanks. They come out to watch this spectacle, along this barbed wire fence. And first, the kids make friends, call out to the refugee children. The kids get together, start talking to each other, getting to know each other. Then the adults get together. So Americans at the time, a lot of immigrants are second generation. They speak Italian and Polish and Russian, Yiddish.
Makes sense.
So next thing you know, they're making friends. They're passing shoes and socks and cigarettes and soda and beer and clothing, and bicycle goes over for the kids over the fence.
Wow. Okay.
So lifetime friendships are made at the fort at this fence. So it's considered where the Holocaust came to America. Right? So everyday Americans first got to meet victims of Nazi persecution and became their advocates on their side. These refugees had signed an agreement paper saying they would return to Europe at the end of the war, right, when the war is over. But you sign anything to get out of there, and basically they had nothing to return to. All their homes and businesses were destroyed. Their families are all murdered. They got nothing to go back to. So, but there they are. So they have advocates, and that a movement built to support these refugees to allow them to stay in the United States. So great historical significance here.
Absolutely, sure. I didn't realize you said over 100,000 Holocaust refugees entered the United States during the war.
Yeah, about 150, not entered the United States. In Europe, the War Refugee Board was able to provide bribes and money to get people out of, say, occupied countries,
Right.
out of Yugoslavia, get them over to Turkey, bring them into Italy,
I see. Okay.
across the Adriatic. Yeah, not the United States.
Mm.
It's the only group of people brought over,
I see.
mostly
Okay.
Jews.
Yeah.
Now, Roosevelt did bring in about 100 people who weren't Jewish, you know, uh, you know, some Catholics, some Protestants, Russian Orthodox, just to say they weren't all Jewish. Politics again.
Yeah. To
FDR is
gloss it
probably the
over. Yeah.
greatest, slickest politician
Sure.
ever produced. No one could really get a grip on him.
He
You
had to do
tell
what he
one,
had to do for the time.
yeah, yeah.
I have to ask though, where were they in the fort the entire time? These refugees?
They were in the barracks that were originally built for the Harlem Hellfighters.
I see.
The mobilization buildings, your typical two-story army wooden, dormitories, right?
Okay.
And other buildings, the old red brick buildings. The whole 75 acre military reservation was used. This picture here, you see, it's all cleared, but there were nearly about 180 buildings on this property.
Oh.
There's theaters, there's hospitals, there's red brick buildings, there's mobilization buildings, from World War II, 1940, 41. There's Army National Guard buildings from 1925 to 1940.
Mm.
And then there's World War I buildings. This place was packed.
Mm.
Now you had in 1943, 42, you had 2,000 soldiers there, wall to wall buildings.
Right.
But they all stayed in dormitories. They had in barracks. They had to convert the two-story dormitories from soldiers, say artillerymen, with a bathroom at the end of the hall. They convert everything into apartments.
Mm.
They did this from between like June 14th, 1944 to early August 1944. In like 6, 7 weeks, all the contracts got let out. All this modernization was done to get this fort ready for these refugees.
And they arrived when in 44?
August 5th, 1944, around 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning.
So they put pedal to the metal to get that stuff ready for them.
Overnight train. Yeah, and then to get them there, but then to build all this stuff, yeah, they really did. It was wartime. There's no messing around. You can't not like now where they've taken like an extra decade to finish a submarine.
Yeah, true that. Yeah.
Yeah, you get the job done.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty impressive. So I'm just reading as I go, and then it served essentially, how long were they there? Were they
They
there
were there,
after? Go ahead.
yeah. Okay, till August 5th, 1944. The last one leaves on February 5th, 1946. 18 and a half months,
Okay.
right? There's 18 different nationalities, 23 different languages.
Mm.
So it's an interesting group.
Were they
It's
was there an attempt to try and teach them English while they were there?
intense.
Yeah.
Now, the kids, of course, the Catholic bishop shows up, comes in. First of all, as soon as Oswego found out, the mayor found out that Roosevelt was doing this. This is June 14th, 1944.
Mm-hmm.
Within an hour or so, local people got together, formed a committee to welcome and assimilate, make things easier, and sent a cable to Roosevelt thanking him for the honor of choosing Fort Ontario for this refugee shelter.
Mm.
A real shock, there's a lot of feeling against refugees, but Oswego, these people really did a good thing.
They opened
But
their arms to them. Well, that's good.
yeah, the bishop says these kids, the Catholic kids, are going to Catholic schools. The superintendent of schools, Riley in Oswego, he says these kids are going to public schools, and then so they taught as much English as they could in those 4 or 5 weeks in August, early September, before they went to school. And then some of the adults as well, but kids are quick learners.
Yeah.
So eventually, some of the older kids, adults, were able to go to college at the normal school, which is now SUNY Oswego.
Okay, so they, regardless of the attestation they signed when they first came, they had no intention of going back to Europe.
Oh, many did. Some did.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah. Some went if they had a relative outside the country, they were allowed to go with them.
Mm.
Um, in May of 1945, about 13 of the Yugoslavs decided to go back, and then in August of 45, about 53 more of the Yugoslavs went back to Yugoslavia.
I see. Okay.
So they had ties there.
Hmm.
Still some neighbors.
But the
So
majority, did the majority stay here in the United States?
majority did.
Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They had to find sponsor families.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Today, when refugees come in, um, the government has different organizations, agencies that deal with them, help them out. Food and medical care.
Right.
This does not exist. Look, various groups, Jewish groups from around the state and elsewhere, other groups, Catholic type charities, type organizations, But I Breathe, they all got together to help these refugees provide services, get supply their needs, get clothing. Uh, Many people hadn't seen doctors in years.
Right.
Dental care. The government would pay for basic dental care a little bit, but they wouldn't pay for like bridge work and things these people desperately needed.
Hmm.
So all these groups rose up um, to help.
Yeah,
Um,
I was going to ask you how extensive the Jewish, specific Jewish organizations were in the country during World War II.
yeah, they were very, very active. And
Yeah.
National Refugee Service, of course, was the big one,
Hmm.
helping them out. They set up movies. Children, the Quakers, the Society of Friends came in, established programs, for kids and adults,
Hmm.
summer programs, because summer of 45, these kids are out of school. What are you going to do?
Right.
Stuck behind a fence. They live behind a fence. You can only leave for 6 hours a day. All right, you
Into
had to have a pass.
into the Oswego community, or
Yeah, you couldn't go outside the city limits
okay.
till, till later on in the summer of 45. They could, but this is literally it's a prison. It's a level imprisonment. They were not free to go. They're supposed to stay within the fence. Some people snuck out, of course, and great stories of that. Um, then they're going with the local people to their houses and having meals and making friends. So, what I did mention is this is the first group of refugees allowed into the United States outside that 1924 immigration quota system.
Hmm.
Right? They they opened the door for later groups like those fleeing communism in the 1950s and 60s. We remember, of course, Vietnam after 1975, all the Vietnamese coming in that we brought in.
Hmm.
Cuba in 1980, at 80, the Mariel boat lift to Somalia,
Hmm.
Afghanistan. So it all begins at Fort Ontario. These people were were invited in.
Hmm.
So it's the birthplace of U.S. refugee policy here, Fort Ontario.
What do you know about what FDR used in terms of the tool to circumvent the 1924 immigration?
He brought it under his Emergency Powers Act.
Okay.
He was able to do that. He had a fund to do that. Um, so
And that was
and
during,
more
well,
refugee.
plus
Yeah,
he had emergency war powers.
yeah, he had
Yeah.
that. It's part of that, and he had a fund for you. That's what he used. He funded the War Refugee Board, I believe, with that.
Hmm.
Okay, which so he established that in January 1944. But when the war in Europe is over, that had to close down. So by July 1944, the WRB is shut down. Well, the refugee shelter was being run through their rules and policies. It
Right.
was actually being run by the War Relocation Authority, the people who ran the Japanese American camps.
Oh,
So
in
this is
California. Yeah.
transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, so things got a little better when the WRA took over.
Uh-huh.
Um, these are good people. They did not like doing what they did with the Japanese American camps. So
Yeah, I was just
You
going
know,
to ask you, do you know what was the general quality of life for them during these folks in Oswego during that time?
but it was far better than what they would have endured in
Well, yeah.
Italy. They were in Allied camps,
Hmm.
Ferramonti and others.
Hmm.
But they had more freedom to run around and go work outside the camp and do things. But at Fort Ontario, they were not allowed to work outside or have jobs. Um,
That's interesting.
yeah, because they didn't want, again, competition with workforce, but they really needed them, but they couldn't. They helped out that one fall of 44 with the harvest. Oswego is incredible farm country with onions and apples.
Hmm.
You're downstate. You're probably familiar with Orange and Ulster County with the muck farms, the
Yep.
black dirt.
Hmm.
That's what Oswego is.
Mm.
Same thing. All these Italians came in the 1890s.
Hmm.
They reclaimed all these swamps and made them incredibly fertile fields for onions and other crops.
To
And
this day, correct?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is big.
Yeah.
Great vegetables and other things here as well. So they got out for that. A few guys, one was a tailor. They'd come in and maybe make some clothes.
Hmm.
Um, there were a few exceptions, but they could not work and they had to work for low wages. When they took these people, um, they were told the men who chose them in Italy were told not to bring in people, men of military age, because they get a lot of flack. You know, why are these people not in the army, in the various armies fighting the Germans? You
I
know,
see. Okay. Yeah.
so they end up with mostly people from the early 40s up to 80, then younger people. So lacking people in their 20s and 30s,
Right.
people who can work.
Mm.
And
Okay.
they don't tell these people who are, they're told they're guests of the United States that they have to work the shelter. So all these 180 so buildings are heated by coal. If you remember coal, um, it's heavy. Well, you have to haul it everywhere. Then it makes cinders and ash. That has to be hauled every day. Different details would have to go out through garbage. And when you're taking guys who aren't used to doing that, shopkeepers, jewelers,
Right.
tailors, you know, I sat behind a computer for last 25 years.
Yeah. Yeah. All of a
I
sudden you're
haul,
hauling coal around. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I do. If I try to do snow, even with a snowblower for one day or a few hours, I'm out for 3 days.
Yeah. I understand what they
So
must have went through. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so some resentment with that.
Hmm.
But it was kind of cool with the foods. They had mess halls. They got kosher kitchens pretty quick because local Jewish groups
Hmm.
uh, helped them establish kosher kitchens. They had rabbis with them. So you look at the menus and you're taking this food bought by the government and they're putting their various national food dish twists on them.
Ah,
Okay, so it's kind of neat.
that's pretty
But
cool. Yeah.
they get here and where Doris Schechter is now is alive down in New York City, became a restaurateur,
Yep.
cookbook author. She gets her first hot dog. And over on the lake there, where now the parking lot is, there's a picture of her at age 5 or 6 looking at this hot dog. What is this? Eating her first hot dog.
Yeah. So they got
Then they give
creative.
him, yeah, they give him bread, and
Yeah.
we're used to white bread, America.
Yeah.
One girl goes, "Is this cake?" Because
Yeah.
it's so light and fluffy. So they were able to make some of the darker European breads for them.
Cool.
So
So I'm I have the advantage of reading this. I know people that are listening to us. If you do, I will put the link to this is a park service. Uh, this fort is run by the National Park Service, correct?
New York State Parks.
Oh, New York State Parks. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was, and I can read that it was transferred to the state of New York in 1946,
yes.
where it housed World War II veterans and their families until 1953.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you and then it says it opened as a state historic site in 1949. So it was opened as an historic site while there was still um, World War II veterans and their families living there.
You ever been a landlord?
Yes.
You ever try getting people out?
Ah, I see. Okay.
Right? There you go.
Okay. Okay, that
Yep.
answers that question.
Yep.
So when did the obviously this is so interesting, the immigration, the refugee part of this story of this fort. But when did the interest in the role it played going back to the colonial days, uh, where people actually wanted to go to see where those things occurred?
They come to the state historic site. We have exhibits on all phases of the fort's history. Right?
No, I mean, when during the history of this fort did people start wanting to come here to, like, say,
Oh, that's a
pre-World War
good
II?
question.
Yeah.
I've been collecting postcards from back to the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
At least back then, you got 1906 postcards, 1913 postcards. You know, stopped in to see the fort. Here, hi, I'm doing good. I'm reporting for school over to normal school, but here's what's going on.
Mm.
You know,
So there was always an historical interest in the fort,
yeah,
even while it was still an active military base.
yes.
Okay, cool.
And then you have these veterans' families living in these buildings and talking about giving people tours through the underground casemates.
Uh,
Yeah. So,
well,
but
they would know, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you served as the manager of this state historic site for quite some time, correct?
Yes, I worked there as the court chief of interpretation from 1986 to 1992.
Hmm.
Then I went down to Washington's headquarters in Newburgh. Came back in '99. They made me manager of the fort.
I
Yes,
see.
so 25 years as manager.
That's
Yeah.
God bless you for doing that. You know.
Well, I thank the people of the state of New York who gave me my dream job and let me do it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So so when you left what you left that role at least last year.
June of last year, I
Yeah.
finished my last project.
And now
That
we have
I
now.
wanted every last room furnished in there, and it's the second floor of the barracks with the squad rooms where the soldiers lived.
Ah.
Right, so I had the one room done with the. I did one pre-Civil War, year 1850, Mexican War type uniforms,
Mm,
with big wooden three-tiered bunks with the gun racks at one end for their smoothbore muskets or 1842 Springfields.
right.
But okay, this is great, and thanks to Eddie Heinrichs and Ryan Hibbert and Dave Lammy. They built me a wall between the two buildings. Like originally, the wall was down the middle of the second floor of the barracks. We got it back in. We built a sergeant's room. So one side is 1850. The other side was 1868, which is our current interpretive period at the fort. This time we had the most information, photographs, paintings. The lieutenant kept every piece of paper he ever wrote it for Ontario, 1868-69.
Mm,
Phenomenal information to restore the interiors, plus the photographs, the exterior. And the commandant was an artist. He did two watercolor paintings going each way inside the fort, so we know the colors of everything.
wow. It must
But
be quite challenging to encompass so much history when you're
yeah,
trying to interpret it in terms of
yeah,
decorating it for the
yeah.
periods.
But lots of challenges.
Yeah.
But my successor, Matt McVitie, has, so I left a few for him. But the last problem was the 1868 room required iron bunks, one man bunks. Other wooden bunks fit six men, two men side by side. All right. Iron bunks are one man, one bunk. Um, Civil War hospital pattern. Um, there's only one known to exist, and we have that in the collection from Sackett's Harbor Battlefield, State Historic Site. But we had a couple made, reproductions made in the past. They're about $1,200, $1,400. We don't have that
Wow.
kind of money.
Hmm.
But we have a friends group, Friends of Fort Ontario, and they bought the steel to make these bunks. And the local BOCES city of Oswego, um, Center for Instruction and Training,
Hmm.
these high school kids made 25 of these bunks,
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah.
saved us almost $50,000.
Wow.
And and we were able to finish it with the bunks, the gun racks, the foot lockers. So that was it, my
A-
last project.
And the
You know,
kids got a good historical education out of it.
and they'll be bringing their grandchildren to
Right,
just see it.
right.
Yeah,
Well, that's a phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Kudos to you for. Did you come up with that idea?
yeah, and Joe Thatcher, the curator who retired many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We back in the late '80s, early '90s, when I was young and full of vim and vigor, we had all sorts of dreams.
Mm-hmm.
It took from
Yeah.
1986 to 2024 to get these this done.
Yeah.
So we knocked off one project after another. The Powder magazine, the the offices, the Corps of Engineers office. That's the only one that's ever been restored in the United States. It did that in 2004 or 5.
Wow.
The quartermaster office, the two guardhouses got restored. The
Yeah.
kitchen mess room where you come in and see how the soldiers cooked and ate, 10-day rotations,
Uh-huh.
you know. So it's a vignette. You go right back in 1868, 69 there.
Wow, that must be a great feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
So you accomplished that, and kudos to you for doing that. But now you're taking on a new challenge, which I think is within the same fort, correct?
It's in the same complex of on the National Register District.
Right. And
This,
this is called the Safe Haven Holocaust Refugee Shelter Museum.
yes,
And with your permission, I'd like to share that page while we discuss that.
please,
Yeah.
please do.
Which is this page here. Right? Can you see it on your end?
Yep,
Yeah.
it's some of the exhibits.
And this is within the fort, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
This is not within the old stone fort. No,
Okay.
this is outside. This is a private museum
Uh-huh.
located on the National Register District in the old Army guardhouse from 1905.
Which is
That's
this.
it right
Okay. Perfect.
there. Okay.
Okay.
This is where I believe the refugees on their passes came in and out. All right. Checked in and checked out.
To this house here.
Yep. To right
Yeah.
there. That's the Army guardhouse where soldiers who got in trouble would be. The 24-hour guard would be there.
Ah.
The FDR would have inspected the guard there in 1913 when he came in. So in 2002, we opened that museum. Our first exhibits were more chronological because we didn't have the artifacts built up yet.
Mm-hmm.
But since between 2002 and 2022, we got a lot of great donations from refugees and their families, local people. You know, local people had shelter-related artifacts.
Right.
Those are all on display now, and we're getting more and more of them.
So
You know?
this museum is focused specifically on the refugees you discussed
Yes,
earlier. Okay.
that's correct. It's totally devoted to the refugees.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And oh, here's a better pic. Well, a still picture of the building.
yep.
Yeah. So, what made you want to do this after doing all those years in the fort?
Well, I was a founding member of the museum. It's part of the history of the fort.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so naturally, I got on the committee in 1988, 89 when Mayor John Sullivan proposed it. He had 1986. It was on Charles Corral Sunday morning. Faith Daniels came up, did a great special on the refugee shelter,
Okay.
interviewed refugees. 1987 was Paul Lewis out of Rochester Public TV. The mayor had this idea, boy, this is so unique, we should have a museum.
Hmm.
So we started meeting. I showed up in a softball uniform, my first meeting. And I think I was 20, I was 30 years old, and I could still pitch. Um, so, um, so
What
eventually,
could you hit though? That's the important thing.
oh, frankly, I couldn't until one time I had 3 or 4 beers before a game. I knocked the first pitch over the left field fence. So
Oh,
that was
God
my
bless you.
policy from then on.
You swung at the middle one.
Yeah. I mean, my batting, boy, I was incredible after that.
So,
So,
so go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, but go
okay.
ahead. Yeah.
So it builds up. I left in 1992. I left the fort. They brought in new management. It was a unsettled time at the fort. So I went down to Washington's headquarters, and then after they got everything cleared out in 1999, I came back, and they hadn't really gotten anywhere. But in '99, when it came back, they just got some people who could get things done.
Mm-hmm.
Judy Rappaport, a professor from the college, Mike Howard, who was a chief engineer at Novelis, Alcan, the big aluminum plant here.
Uh-huh.
Um, it just these people were movers, and I knew the history. So I got back on the board, and by 2002, we opened up the museum.
Mm.
We just I was in the building committee, so I did the library, the research files, um, set up the office, got donation for computers and things called fax machines, Uh, so
Newfangled things.
we got it opened up.
Yeah.
So, but the origins of everything really date back to 1981, which is my father. I guess my father, World War II generation, mother retiring. They're getting nostalgic. You had the 40th anniversary of World War II coming up.
Uh-huh.
Ronald Reagan was president. And so um, the refugees, a few of them, and the B'nai B'rith, the Syracuse Jewish women got together. They invited Ruth Gruber, the woman who accompanied the refugees and helped them out here when they were here. They had a reunion and they put a monument up in 1981.
Interesting.
And and Ruth gets this idea. I'm going to write a book. She had saved all of her journals, her notes. 1983, they have another reunion. It's getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Ruth's book is published, so that gets out. Charles Kuralt probably sees that, or someone at CBS. The New York State Museum gets involved. They established a beautiful exhibit there in 1986 on the refugee shelter. They
Mm.
created a refugee room, bedroom, and things like that.
Right.
So it's been a slow build-up. Um, so the museum opens 2002. 2022, 23, we got new exhibits. But in 2016, Congressman John Katko um, took a tour of the fort. He goes, why isn't this a national park? He tours everything, and okay. And we had a committee established at that point, to establish the National Register District, or try to get into like a UNESCO and become a natural heritage park or site, which is
Right.
not a national park. So kind of raise its elevation. And so the committee said, yeah, why not? So John Katko began a movement in Congress. He tried to draft a bill. They had the Park Service do a 3-year study. Um, he tried it, but unfortunately, Senator Gillibrand didn't get the bill in for the Senate, so it wasn't duplicated, so it couldn't go in 2017 like it was supposed to.
To switch it
Um,
from a state park to a federal to a
yeah, at least
okay.
not just to study, not to actually
I
do it, it's to
I see.
study.
Okay.
All right. So Catco says, wait a minute, Park Service has some money. He initiates a 1-year study, uh, determine its eligibility. Is it worthy of becoming a national historic site or park?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but the next year, or 2019, Senator Gillibrand, uh, Catco, they get together and they get it passed. President Trump is 2018. Within a day of getting the bill to him, after it goes through both houses, he signs it right away. Park Service begins the study, but then COVID hits,
Ah.
so it delays the results until August of 2024.
Wow. That's a long
At
time.
that point, Congresswoman Tenney, Claudia Tenney, um, she took over the project, and she worked very well um, with our Senator Gillibrand. The two of
Mm-hmm.
them, bipartisan, working together, come up with duplicate bills so there wouldn't be any change that had to be made. Got through Congress okay. Then something happened in the Senate when the government went home to solve the budget problem, so it didn't get passed. December of 24, it comes out, but the government leaves early in the Senate and it doesn't get out of committee.
Mm.
Then they tried, but it just never got out. So they were on the precipice to become a national historical park.
Ah.
It was almost there.
Mm.
It's the guardhouse and museum is the Park Service liked the three other red brick buildings behind the museum, which are all four of these buildings are owned by the city of Oswego now. And the mayor and the city is very amenable to becoming national park. So
Including
that's
the
where that,
building this museum is housed in.
yeah, this,
Yeah.
so almost there, 2.5 acres would have become a national historical park, for the National Park Service, but it's like getting up to the last camp on Mount Everest, not quite making the summit, but
You gotta keep pushing uphill, right?
yep, that's it.
Yeah.
Now it's regroup and see what we can do.
Yeah, well, just the site itself, that the page we're on, and don't worry if you're driving in your car listening to us or wherever you listen to your podcast, the link to what we're looking at will also be on the show notes. And if you're on YouTube, you can see what we're watching. This kind of illustrates the whole story you were telling me about the refugee situation during World War II.
Yep, there's a refugee Boy Scout troop. Local Harold Clark, local Boy Scout leader, formed a refugee Boy Scout group here.
Yeah.
You know, Girl Scouts, everything.
And there was one other page I just want to share real quick, if you don't mind. This is the Holocaust Memorial Museum collection. Um, is this also within that museum?
No, that's in Washington.
Oh, this one here. Okay.
Yeah, that's at the Holocaust Museum in Washington.
I want to put a link to this because there's a phenomenal film on the site called Over the Rainbow Bridge,
Yes.
which discusses what you're talking about at Fort Ontario during World War II.
Yeah.
So
There's
I'd
a
like, yeah.
great exhibit, a gallery on Fort Ontario on the refugee shelter in the museum.
Ah,
In the Americans in the Holocaust exhibit. I think it's being shut down for a year while they rehab it.
hmm,
But that film is kind of interesting because initially we only had about 60 seconds of it
hmm,
for 70 years. It's all
right.
we saw.
Hmm.
And then Marilyn Huntington, who worked for me at Fort Ontario, I had her going after newspapers. That newspapers.com is incredible. So anything pertaining to refugees, any other subject in the fort, you know, we pull and put into the files. She hands me one from January 1946. And it's an article on the refugees going over to Canada, crossing the Rainbow Bridge. All the refugees had to get processed, get their visas done. If they're going to stay in the United States, they had to travel by buses over to Buffalo and over to Niagara and do the final processing at Niagara at the Canadian side before being allowed to go to the sponsor families around the country.
Right.
So in this article, they mentioned they're going to do a film called Over the Rainbow Bridge. I go, what? And what is that? And I look everywhere. We try to find that, could never find a copy of it. So uh, I talked to Rebecca Erbelding, who is a historian at the National Holocaust Museum in Washington. You know what the link that you're providing here.
Right.
She's, I think, my opinion, the nation's top Holocaust historian. She is writing a book about the refugee shelter that will be coming out in 2027.
Hmm.
All right. So I give her this problem. Have you ever heard of this? And she said no. But she got the curator of film, photography or whatever, at the Holocaust Museum of Washington to start looking. And he finds it at the Pennsylvania Historical Society. All
Wow.
right. And it's like 13, 14 minutes long, as people will see if they look
Yeah,
at it.
that's about right. Yeah.
We never knew this. Didn't
Hmm.
know it existed. We didn't know where that thing came from. But they wouldn't give it to the Holocaust Museum. But then, remember a few years ago, Ken Burns did his Holocaust study,
Yeah.
his film.
Yeah. The documentary. Yeah.
Well, they coughed it up for Ken Burns, and now then to the museum, now everybody has it. So what a resource.
It's an incredible 14 minutes. I highly recommend anyone listening to us would watch it because
Yeah,
you'll learn a hell of a lot that I didn't know and what they went through at the time.
right. It was such turmoil. Well, can we stay? Can we? They couldn't move on their lives. They couldn't.
Hmm.
Are they going to be forced back to Europe where everything was destroyed or not?
Mm.
Their
Yeah.
families are gone.
Right.
Yeah, it was
So,
just terrible.
so the Safe Haven Holocaust Refugee Museum,
Yes.
uh, if you're visiting the fort, you should be able, it should be, I guess I envision you could walk there, right? If
Oh,
you,
yes. You can park it in the main parking lot. You can drive in walk the other, or just drive to both, or within. You can see one from the other.
Right. So if you're visiting Fort Ontario,
Yeah,
this is an easy. This is you're at the
yeah.
same spot.
This
Oh,
museum is open all year.
hmm
We reduce our hours at the end of September to
hmm
Thursday through Sunday.
Okay.
Fort Ontario State Historic Site, though, will close for the winter. They'll go to Columbus Day,
hmm
and they won't open up again till early of May. So be aware of that. So
The museum or the fort?
the fort itself,
I see. Okay.
they
Yeah,
close because
it's pretty damn cold up there in Oswego there, Paul.
yeah, well, it keeps the New York City developers out. So
Yeah. Well, I've kept you way over time, and I appreciate you sharing so much information. But this is, like I told you, this is right in my wheelhouse. So, um, but I have to ask you, do you know how many people, refugees that ended up in the fort, stayed in Oswego after the war?
yeah, but I think three families stayed briefly. One, the Coffin family till 1959,
Uh-huh.
the photographer. But most of these people, had relatives around the country. Say New York City was the big draw.
Right. So they
They, knew,
promulgated
they
throughout the
found
country.
sponsor families,
Hmm
and they're from Eastern Europe, and the weather really isn't, well, suitable for some people from Eastern Europe. But when they they got here, it was August. It was beautiful weather, like it is now.
hmm
And the one writes to a friend, "It's like we're on the Riviera. It's incredible here." But by the end of September, they were singing a different tune.
You'll wait a couple of weeks. Yeah.
That's
Well,
it.
maybe some of them ended up down in the Bronx where I came from.
Oh, very much. Many did.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Because
that's big garment district is New York City.
New York City is a huge Jewish
Natural.
population in the Bronx at the
Yep.
time. I don't know about now,
Baltimore,
but yeah. Okay.
Baltimore, another big Jewish population. Yeah.
But a couple
So
of handfuls stayed for a couple of years after the
yeah,
war.
briefly. Yep.
Mhm.
But
Well, this has been a great, I know it's way more than an hour. I apologize for keeping you so long, but it's such a great story. I'm so glad you were willing to share it with our audience.
I'm very grateful for you inviting me, and I hope that people come up to Oswego, and you might want to put on an extra layer when you come here.
Well, I'll wait till next summer. But people that aren't from New York don't realize. Like I think I told you before we started recording. I'm like an hour and change north of New York
Yeah.
City. You're like 7 hours from me. So
It's all highway. It's the easiest place to get in and out of. It's all highways.
no, but what my point is, people don't realize how enormous the state of New York is,
Oh, yes, right.
and
Yeah,
and how historically relevant to the history of the country it is.
right, right.
So. And I do appreciate your time, Paul. Maybe you should pen a book, if you have some time on your hands.
Yeah, I've got a book on the War of 1812 on the fort that I have to finish, but Rebecca is doing the one on the shelter, so
Yes, well, you can
better hand.
you can mention her in your
Yes,
footnotes.
yeah, okay.
All right, Paul. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I do appreciate it. And stay in touch. I'd love to learn more. I mean,
So,
you're a well of information, so
send you an update from time to time.
I will indeed. Thank you, Paul. I
Take care.
appreciate it.
Bye,
Have a great
everybody. Thanks for
okay.
joining us.
Have a great night.